So everybody, welcome to the Business of Tech webinar. So firstly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and then why I came to this. So I am a non-techie. I'm not a developer. I'm not a data scientist, although I have worked with them. I started my career in financial PR and then I worked in a private equity firm. So like very analog. And then I did my MBA at Chicago Booth, which is consistently ranked as the global #1 business school. And again, that was business, that was not technology. And that's when I started working on a technology venture called Enti. It's a retail tech company. And I'm a non-technical founder, and I had to learn all about how to essentially start a tech company. And since I'd never even worked in one, that was obviously really difficult. So, I ended up getting a technical co-founder, hiring a technical team, producing various different products, including an app and an algorithm and a site and an analytics panel. But it was honestly very, very difficult at the beginning because while I think, everybody who's on this webinar is going to know that there are lots and lots of opportunities in technology. I mean, it's pretty difficult to even open the Financial Times and not see some kind of, basically somebody making lots of money in tech. If you're an outsider like I was, it's really difficult to even begin to even know where to begin. So, Google has all the answers, but you've got to know what the question is. And I knew I didn't want to become a developer. But I knew that I wanted to work with developers to create things and essentially to enhance my career. So it was a very difficult process in which I took courses and read books, etc., etc. Anyway, then I started writing about technology and innovation and entrepreneurship in Forbes, and I've written for the Financial Times and the Guardian on these topics. And I've basically created this Tech for Non-Techies network. And I can see that some of you lovely people have already been my students, have already come to my classes. So hi. Some of my classes have actually been taught at very prestigious places like London Business School, of which I'm very proud. So this is tried and tested material. And I'm just really happy that I get to share that, one of the outcomes of this pandemic is that I get to share the material that is often locked away, that I get to share it with you now. So let's talk about this. So this is the most important thing that you need to understand, which is the linear versus the cyclical production process. So I think some of you have heard me talk about this before. But the reason why I want to tell you about this is that there are so many opportunities in technology. And I'm telling you about this, whether you want to be a founder of a technology-enabled business, or if you want to just transition your career. So for example, maybe you're working in finance somewhere now. I don't know, you're working in the finance department and you want to move to the finance department of a tech company. I still think you need to understand the basics of how tech companies work from the inside. Or if you're working in a traditional business now, but you need to essentially digitize the business. And one of the reasons also I'm bringing this course out and making it publicly available now is that I've seen quite a lot of demand from people who are in traditional businesses and have to digitize very, very quickly. Excuse me. Much more quickly than they had ever intended to. So they basically really need to learn these basics. So if you are going to switch off this webinar, then just give me 5 minutes and then switch it off, because the thing I'm about to tell you is the most important thing. So in a traditional company, let's imagine that you are working in Renault. So that's a French car manufacturer, and you're working there in 1995. Let's just imagine that. So how would you go about making a car? So you would think about what are the societal trends and the financial trends driving the world today. So one of the societal trends you'd think is that more women are going to work. So more women are coming out and earning their own money as opposed to being housewives. So what does that mean? It means that they're putting off having children until later. So that means that they have disposable income and they want to spend that disposable income on doing fun things. So they want to go on trips with their girlfriends, and they're probably living in urban areas because most most jobs are going to be in urban areas. So given that you know that this is a big societal change, say, if we're talking, you're thinking this in 1995, and you're looking at kind of trends, that's a big societal change. So then you're thinking about this person, and then you think, okay, well, what does she need? You'd think, well, she needs something quite stylish, and she needs something quite small because she doesn't need to bung a whole family into this car, and it needs to be fairly easy to maneuver because she needs to park in the small streets of Paris. So you have this concept. Then you would go to designers, and then they will make you several designs. And then after that, maybe you have some focus groups, but really it's like, I would really doubt the use of a focus group when you're showing people pictures of a car. Then after that, when you've settled on a design, you're going to give that to a factory. And the factory is extremely expensive. So in this factory, you're essentially operating blind. This thing is getting made, but it's super, super expensive. And you are investing all of this money to make this super expensive thing. And then at the end of it, the best possible case scenario is that, you give it to your, after you've made the thing, hopefully, it looks to specifications, but it has to be perfect. This thing has to be perfect. Then you're giving it to the salespeople. So you need to have really nice, expensive showrooms with very nice, well-groomed, expensive people who are taking people out on test drives. And in that best case scenario, somebody just comes and buys the car. So that's like the best thing you can possibly hope for. But then you have no idea what happens later. You don't know if the person who bought the car is the person who's going to be driving the car. You have no idea how they're driving it. Maybe a woman in your target age range came in, but actually maybe she bought it for her aging father because he no longer needs to transport kids around either. You have no idea if your customer is satisfied with your car or if they're just finding it really annoying. The best or the worst case that you can imagine is that you'll have reviews. So you can only understand what people actually think of this very expensive thing that you've made, essentially when it hits the papers, which I personally, I do not have the guts to work in that kind of industry because you're working blind, you're investing so much money, and you only find out if you've done a good job or a bad job after you've essentially just poured loads and loads of money into something. Technology is a very, very different process, which is why I personally find it more interesting. But also, I think it's a very different philosophy. So let's take Uber, and obviously this is an app. So let's imagine. Did anybody notice when Uber's logo changed? You could just write yes or no in the chat box. I would love to know. They used to have a black and white one, and then they changed to purple. I don't know what it is now because I erased it since obviously I'm not taking any Ubers anywhere. Anyway, so when Uber changed its logo, most likely, unless you are very specific about the settings on your iPhone, most likely you wouldn't have even noticed. So one day you wake up and the Uber logo is no longer black and white. It is now black and purple. So how did that change? It changed because essentially the technical production process is cyclical. So somebody has an idea, so an idea for an app. In this case, let's have a taxi service which connects, a taxi service platform which connects lots of drivers to lots of people. So that's the basic concept. Then again, you would work with designers, but even at the design stage, you're creating prototypes, and those prototypes are being tested by people in order for you to understand whether your design is actually any good. Then after that, you're giving your tested design to your developers. The developers are then making it. And then once you release your product, you then actually track how people are using it, and then you improve it. So instead of having this super expensive thing that you've been working on for ages and ages and ages, with designers and creating this massive factory and investing all of this money, you are essentially just creating something that does what you want it to do in the most basic form. Then you release it to people, you see how they use it, and based on how they use it, you improve it. So essentially, if the linear production process is all about perfectionism, because you've got, you can't really, you cannot sell people a half-made car. That is a bad thing and also probably illegal. Whereas with an app, you're releasing the minimum viable product, you're taking the next step, you're seeing how people use it, and then you are making more and more improvements. So I've got a question, I'm just going to see if I can answer it. For some reason, I can't access your questions. If you could just write your question into the chat box, I would love that instead. Thank you very much. So this is basically the production process that we've just discussed. So we've gone from concept to design, and design is where prototypes are made with user experience designers, then development on the front end and on the back end, and databases, etc., etc. We don't have the time to go into it now, but take my word for it. If you've taken my Tech for Non-Technical Founders course, you'll be very, very familiar with this. And then, you release the thing that you've made, people use it, you see how they use it, you analyze that usage, and then you decide where to improve it, and what to do next. So basically you go back to concept. Now, I think this is the most important aspect of the whole kind of business of tech, because not only does this influence product, it also influences the entire philosophy of the company. Because while a traditional business, like our car business here, the car business is aiming for perfection. The car business is spending lots and lots of time planning, and lots of time investing in production, and lots of time in investing into that planning. So traditional businesses, they're going to be the ones that are hiring McKinsey to do research studies of, research and market studies. And, hiring McKinsey, I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's a very expensive thing. Now, tech companies don't need to do that kind of thing, because the way they research is not by hiring a very fancy management consultancy or by getting lots of MBAs to do this research. They literally create a product, they release it, and they see what sticks, and they just see what happens. Which is why I think the two different industries, they have the traditional industry and the tech industry, they attract different personality types. And sometimes, if you ended up in a traditional industry and you think that tech is kind of cool, that's the big mind shift you need to make. Go from lots and lots of strategic planning to essentially incremental improvements. And that goes for your product, that goes for your marketing campaigns, that goes for pretty much everything. The technology, the kind of in the business of tech, you're always learning based on releasing new versions of whatever it is you're doing. So this is something that I really love, because this course and the webinar that I'm doing right now, it is not about making tech products, which is what my other course is about. This is about the business models and how you can make money out of these business models, and the opportunities that non-technical founders have to make money, either as employees or as founders or as transitioners. So two Harvard Business School professors that I interviewed for Forbes a little while ago, they said people who are good at selling fishing rods typically aren't good at selling baby clothes. But the algorithm that creates suggestions on the Amazon website does not suffer from the same limitations. Now, this is why I think it's so important for us non-technical people to understand the basic concepts of how apps and sites and algorithms are made, to then use them for our business. And here, you don't need to make an algorithm yourself. You don't need to code the algorithm. You just need to understand how it's made. So you, as a business person, whether you're working in marketing, or you're working in finance, whatever, or you're working in design, you need to understand how the stuff gets made, so then you can work with the developers and the data scientists together. So what is an algorithm? Does anybody know? Has anybody, some of my, has Has anybody done any work on algorithms before? It's okay if you haven't. Like, nobody comes out of the womb knowing about algorithms. Okay, so an algorithm is an intimidating word, but it's basically just a fancy word for a set of instructions. So it's like, the algorithm of a triangle is something that you would have seen, way back in primary school. Base times height divided by 2. So what's super important to understand about algorithms, and again, this is a value bomb. So another thing, just please remember that algorithms are always based on the past. This is actually why some tech companies and some e-commerce companies are in a little bit of trouble right now, because do you think that the data that we have on a lot of behavior is relevant to today? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this. I mean, obviously we're still human, so some of the things that we're doing is the same as we've always done, but a lot of our behavior has completely changed because all of our lives have gone online. We're not allowed to go out, so a lot of the past data the algorithms have been based on is kind of irrelevant right now. So I've got Hamad, who is asking, can you be in the improvement stage after you have started to give designers to the factory? I am assuming that you're talking about development rather than the cars, because I don't, I'm not a car manufacturer. I work in tech. I'm a business person in technology. In my tech business, we have investors, we have products, I've hired people, I've had to let people go, etc., etc. So I know about the business of tech. I do not know so much about the business of cars. In the business of tech, once you give over you shouldn't make changes to what you're making. You shouldn't change your instructions to your developers halfway through the development cycle. But the development cycle in general is going to be weekly or fortnightly sprints. So you can hold your horses. But if you want more of this kind of information, then either take the business of tech course, or if you really want to go deeper in that, then that's in the tech for non-technical founders course. Cool. So now we've discussed past data. So essentially, what does this say for businesses? So the good thing about algorithms is that instead of hiring lots and lots of people to sell various different things, instead of hiring fishing rod salesmen and then nappy salesmen and then chair salesmen, you literally have one algorithm that learns. In order for it to learn, you need data for it, because if we kind of have a look at this, so we've got the triangle algorithm, right? So base times height divided by 2. We still need to put something in here. So what is the base? So 2 times 2 divided by 2. We still need to put numbers in there. And those numbers are essentially always going to be generated by past events. So for example, very practically, let's have a look at Facebook. The more I use Facebook, the more data I give Facebook about myself. So every time that I go on Facebook, even when I'm not actually uploading my own content, so even when I'm not uploading a photo or checking in, and frankly, where would I be checking in right now? So every time that I interact on Facebook, I'm giving it information about myself, because every time that I'm scrolling through the newsfeed, then Facebook can see, what am I interested in? Literally, they measure, when does your thumb stop on the newsfeed? Every time that I like somebody's photo, Facebook then infers that I probably have a good relationship with that person, and this is probably the kind of content that I'm interested in. So the more I interact on this thing, the more Facebook understands me, because Facebook then collects all of this data and then puts it into very smart algorithms. Facebook can then create the kind of newsfeed that I'm going to be really, really engaged in. So my Facebook, even if I had exactly the same friendship group on Facebook as all of you, then my newsfeed would still look very different from yours. That's because I would have probably liked and interacted with exactly the same set of people in a different way. So because Facebook understands that, they will serve content that is most interesting to me, content by the most interesting people, and the kind of content that I'm most likely to essentially to share or to watch. And because of that, I'm using Facebook more and more, because obviously if it collects lots of data, then it has these algorithms which are essentially learning about me. Then it gives me this good service. Then I keep on coming back to use it. And Facebook, the more it learns about me, um, the and the more I use it, the more they can monetize my attention via an advertising business model. So um, what you can see with algorithms is that essentially algorithms are not just, don't just think of them as products that keep you as humans just engaged and just coming back. That's important. But there's no use of smart technology unless somebody can pay for it. And this is what I think is like, that's the main point that I want to get across to you, is that it's important to understand the basics of how all of this stuff is made. And in the course, we do go into that. But after you've got all of this stuff made, you need to work out how to pay for it. And yes, venture capitalists and investors are a way to finance your development for a little while, but you can't go to a VC or an angel investor and just say, oh, we're going to develop this thing without any kind of business case. That kind of used to be less of the case of probably about 10 years ago, when especially a lot of Silicon Valley VCs were saying, oh, just build something with a big audience and then work out the monetization. But there've been so many problems with that people actually now are really, really focused on, okay, where is the business case? And so that's my note to founders. But equally, if you're interviewing for a tech company, you really need to understand where they're making their money, especially in these times of disruption. Because if you don't understand their business case, is it a really good idea for you to move there, or is it just going to fall apart? Because a lot of investors are pulling their money out. Equally, if you're going to interview with big tech has lots of money. I know that Facebook has still been hiring, Google hasn't put their hiring plans on a freeze. So like there's lots and lots of opportunity there. But equally, you need to understand how those companies make money using the products that they have. So algorithms are some of the key products of tech companies. And here are some of the questions that they answer. So Netflix actually uses algorithms to decide what content to fund. So essentially they're seeing, they would put out types of content, or they would put out a series, or they would put out 6 episodes of a series. Then they would see how that series is being watched. Then they would decide, okay, are there enough people watching this kind of thing? Should we do series 2? But also, not only is it series 2, they'll think, oh, okay, well, this type of content, so maybe not necessarily even this thing, maybe not necessarily this series, but this type of series. Maybe we should make this type of series, maybe it's about, I don't know, stay-at-home moms that become gangsters. Maybe this type of series is actually really amusing and people really like it, so let's make it into a movie. So another thing that I know Facebook does, and I know they do this for a fact, is they are using their algorithms to decide whether a customer is most likely to churn. Churn means that they're going to cancel their subscription. I don't know anybody who is canceling their Netflix subscriptions right now. I do wonder if that's, if Facebook usage, Netflix subscriptions are going to go massively down when we're actually let out. But essentially, if Netflix can see that you're about to leave, then they can either send you special offers like please stay, or they can send you all sorts of content to try to keep you more and more engaged, or essentially they can send you more notifications. So, you know how sometimes if you haven't used a product for a while, then you just start randomly getting emails from them saying, hi, come use us. We're still here. We've got this really great thing for you to watch. that comes from an algorithm that's basically predicting that you're going to churn. Sometimes it's a secret for you. Sometimes it's a good idea to just leave it, because sometimes they send you special offers at the end to prolong, but Netflix doesn't do that, because I tried it. It doesn't work. Anyway, so Facebook, we discussed, it works out what to show you in your news feed. And the business case for that is, the more you scroll on Facebook, the more you use it, the more advertising they can show to you, but also the more targeted that advertising is. Because the more you reveal about your preferences, the more they can understand that, the more they understand whether you like cats or dogs, the more that they're going to be able to create the kind of adverts that are going to be relevant for you. Also, another example, really, really simple. I'm sure lots of you have used this, especially now. Again, we're using Amazon so much for everything. People like you also bought, right at the end, when you buy something on Amazon, or when you're about to buy something, it's, people like you also bought this. It's because Amazon has lots and lots of people who have bought product X, and then they're showing you how, essentially, what you might like to. So in all of these cases, what I want you guys to see is that we have an algorithm, but the algorithm is based on lots and lots of people using it, and based on past data. So algorithm development, that's super important and really useful, but unless you have data to go into it, and unless it's the right data, it's pretty damn useless. So figuring out what the right data is, that is very much a non-techie job. So machine learning engineers are going to be the ones who are going to be writing the code, but people like you and me are going to be the people who are going to be deciding how we should be measuring it. More on that a bit later. So has anybody here got a Peloton? Can you just write in the chat box yes or yes if you do? I don't, but I really, really want one, especially in this time of lockdown. I hear that people are actually having Peloton parties together, which I think just basically means you're working out to the same class. But anyway, so Peloton, have you guys actually heard what it is? Just say yes. If you just say yes or no, that would be great. So Peloton is a yes, Andrea, yes. So Peloton is basically a bike. So it's a stationary bike. And honestly, before Peloton came out, I did not want a stationary bike. Like, I didn't think that this was a particularly sexy item to have. And I certainly didn't think of it as a tech, like as something that you could do with technology. And I think they're like $800. And I was definitely, not on the market for an $800 stationary bike that essentially is going to take up room in your home. But now I really want one. So I really want, because I hear it's amazing, but also because I am really, really into his business model. So what's so interesting about this is that the CEO and founder of Peloton is not a tech person, but he has taken a traditional category and completely digitized it. And if you actually look at the inside of Peloton, inside of the company, not the actual bike, the organization structure of Peloton is basically, it's an AI company. So Peloton is basically this inside. So Peloton is this plus that tech production process that I showed you. And when you actually think of a stationary bike, it's quite surprising. Like, that's because to me, first, a stationary bike just looks very, very analog. So what have they actually done? So the way that Peloton makes money is selling the product. So that's the actual bike. But where it really sees its opportunity is the subscription. So once you buy your stationary bike, you then get access to all sorts of different content. And that content is classes. So you can, you can take all sorts of different classes for your varying different needs. On top of that, they're also building a huge kind of wellness content aspect to it. So, if you're the kind of person who is going to spend $800 on a bike to keep you healthy, what kind of other stuff are you going to want to have? You're also going to want to have content about green smoothies and protein shakes and various other things. So kind of like a Netflix for healthy people. And they're also, on top of that, actually building a social network where you can be, you can essentially reach your fitness goals with, you know, a few million other people around the world. And from what I'm hearing, that people are really actually connecting together over their cycling experiences over Peloton. So actually, it's a metal bike plus content plus a social network, which honestly, until Peloton came along, I didn't even realize that you could do this with a friggin' bike. And this is why I think this is so interesting, especially with the business of tech, because you can see that there's so much opportunity with technology. You can take something that looks like it couldn't really, you know, that looks like it's kind of the finished product, you can't do anything with it, and all of a sudden Peloton becomes a fitness social media company, and it's run by somebody who is a non-techie. So the person who runs it was the CEO of a book selling company, Barnes and Noble. And the reason why he came to this is because he had experience of competing against Amazon. So by competing against a tech company when he was not in a tech company, he came up with an idea of how to make a technology company out of a traditional category. So let's talk about the opportunities in a company like Peloton for non-technical professionals. So if you have any, it would be really cool if you guys could just write what kind of opportunities can you imagine? What kind of jobs do you think there are that are not tech jobs in Peloton? So, I mean, I can get you started with fitness professionals. So you would need to have lots and lots of really high quality fitness professionals that are going to be designing the classes. Another thing that you would need to invest in is you would need to invest in music. So they actually monitor your music selections and what music you like. So then they would need to employ music curators to make sure that the best choices of music are going out to you. So as you can see from this kind of thing, from this case study, you have quite a lot of non-technical people working with technology essentially to scale their talents. So in a normal, Soul Cycle class, because it's the same audience, Soul Cycle is expensive, Peloton is expensive. So essentially the choices that people would have been making before COVID is, shall I pay $35 for a class in Soul Cycle, or shall I buy an $800 bike? That's kind of the decision that you're making there. But, Soul Cycle has been acquired, it's a great business, but at the end of the day, what's the maximum number of people you can fit into a Soul Cycle class? I think like 20. Whereas if you literally just have this bike, then it's completely and utterly scalable. So it's far more interesting for a fitness professional to be working on Peloton. They're going to make far more money than being on Soul Cycle. And actually, you're now seeing the rise of Peloton influencers. So when we actually delve into the course, we've got way more case studies of how technology is being used to upend traditional industries, and also how big tech companies are working from the inside. But now, does anybody have any questions? Because you guys are being terribly quiet, which I hope means that you are just really enthralled with how fascinating this is. But if you've got questions, please type them. Okay. So we've talked about how they make money. Now let's talk about how they spend money. Because whatever you're doing, whatever kind of business, whatever kind of technology business you're going to be in, you need to understand what your business models are, and you need to understand how you're going to be making that money. So actually, let's just look at this first, and then I'll return. So I can see there's. I'm so sorry. For some reason, I just can't access the Q&A. So if you posted a question in the Q&A, just copy and paste it and put it in the chat box. For some reason, the Q&A section is just literally not opening right now. So there's nothing, I literally can't see your questions. So just put them, I'll write here, put your questions in here. Okay. So let's talk about these are some business models in tech. These are not all, but you know, we've only got an hour, so I think a lot of you are going to know about the advertising revenue model. The advertising revenue model is based on a lot of scale. So essentially, you know, if I were to put advertising on this webinar, I wouldn't be able to get lots and lots of scale. Well, I don't have lots and lots of scale for this right now, so I wouldn't be able to get significant advertising revenue. But Google and Facebook basically control the ad market. Gabriella, I've just seen you writing question marks. I'm sorry, I don't understand what your question is, but if you have a question, please write your question in there and I would love to answer it. Then we have freemium business models. An example for this is the dating app Bumble, but there are lots and lots and lots of examples. This is very, very typical. A freemium business model is when you can access something for free, but at a limited basis. And then you have to sign up for more. So for example, Zoom is such a thing. So I have a premium subscription. I have the professional subscription because I host webinars and quite a lot of people come to them. And also I host long calls. So I need to pay for it. A lot of people don't, because you can get Zoom, I think, free for 40 minutes. So that's a freemium. Freemium is basically a mix of premium, where you know, premium membership, you're paying for it, and paid. Another is subscription, and software as a service goes into that. So Netflix, obviously subscription. So Netflix, in order to make money, obviously we talked about how they're creating their content, how they're using algorithms to create their content. They're also using algorithms to make sure that the right content goes to the right people. So for example, I have no interest in football whatsoever. So Netflix never ever shows me any shows about football, which I'm very grateful for. Amazon Prime Video, for example, their algorithm for serving content is much worse. So they keep on showing me adverts about sport and Jeremy Clarkson. So basically, according to Amazon, I'm a middle-aged man, which, you know, I hope you can tell I'm not. Software as a service, that's another business model. There's a lot of money to be made in that. And Salesforce is basically the biggest example there. You're literally, in that example, you as a customer, usually it's businesses that buy this kind of thing. You as a customer, you're essentially you're paying to use a specific software. In a way, Zoom is a little bit like that. It's also software, it's also a service. Right, now let's move on. Sharing economy, Uber, Airbnb. Obviously, technology enables the sharing economy at scale because it allows a platform where users are meeting providers. So I'm a user of Uber, or I used to be when it was still possible to use it. So I'm a user of Uber, and Uber has created a platform that connects me to nearby drivers. So yes, that would have been theoretically possible on a very tiny scale. That's your cab company, but to do it on a big scale, you basically need technology. And all of these companies, oh, actually, no, that's my question for you. I was going to text you. I forgot. Sorry. So e-commerce, obviously you need tech at the core, and e-commerce, not all e-commerce companies are hugely tech enabled. So if you just have a shop on Shopify, you're not going to have all of you will have algorithms working on your product, but you're not necessarily going to know about it. Here I'm talking about the likes of Amazon or ASOS that really have a lot of technology at their core. Amazon is also making money by storage. So has anybody here heard of AWS, Amazon Web Services? Yes, Theo. Exactly. So Amazon, basically, in order, if you have lots and lots of stuff, so at home right now where I am, since I've spent so much time at home, I've been excessively tidying. I'm sure that's probably the case for quite a few of you. So there's a bunch of stuff that I want to put into storage. So when I get out, I'm going to go and take it to some kind of storage place, and I will need to pay to store the stuff that I no longer want around. All my kind of clutter. And what is clutter? Clutter is usually past data. So I've got some old photos that I don't want to throw away, but I want to store them. It's basically exactly the same with digital storage. So all of your photos, all the photos that you put up on Instagram. Instagram is paying to keep them somewhere. You are not paying for it out of your own money. You're paying for it in your attention, because Instagram monetizes your attention. But all of those old photos, just like the old photos that I'm going to put into physical storage, all of those old photos that Instagram has of you, they have to be put into digital storage. And that's basically data storage space, and Amazon Web Services is the best example of that. And then another really good business model that I absolutely love is the hardware plus software, which is basically Apple. You buy a phone, the phone is expensive, but then Apple also makes money each time you download a freemium app. So for example, I've got an iPhone, I've already paid Apple, like $700, then I'm going to say download Bumble, which is an app, and I'm going to sign up to the premium version of Bumble. When I sign up to the premium version of Bumble, then Apple is going to take a 30% cut. And 30% is quite a lot, especially if you think about how many users does Bumble have. Probably, I don't know, imagine 50 million. Probably about 5 million are on premium. So 5 million times whatever the subscription is, times 30%, that's quite a lot of money. So this business model is hugely profitable if you can get it right, but it is very difficult to do, because again, let's look at Apple and let's look at Peloton. Those are very expensive products, but also you actually have to manufacture these products. So you have to go into that kind of slightly blind situation that we were talking about before. So I'm a huge admirer of people who make it really successful, but in my view, it is the most difficult thing to pull off right. But some people do it, and I love Apple products. Okay, so this is how these tech companies. So this is an example of these business models. So this is an example of how tech companies make money. If you are considering creating a company, and you are considering pitching to investors, you are going to have an explanation of how your company is going to be making money. So see if one of these business models is going to work for you. If you're not a founder, but you are somebody who's working in a company that needs to digitize, like a lot of the companies that are digitizing in an emergency right now, it is very possible that your boss is going to say to you, okay, hiring developers and doing all of this stuff is going to cost us money. That is true. So what is the business case? So essentially, have a look at these models, see if anything could work for you. I would suggest also you have an idea of how tech companies spend money, because if you understand generally where your cost is, you will be able to make better business decisions. So one of the best things about the AI factory that we talked about is, remember when we talked about the fishing rods and what was the other example? I forgot now. Anyway, it was you can't have the same person who is selling fishing rods to be selling iPhones. That's going to be a different kind of capability. But in our AI factory, which I showed you before, you just have an algorithm. So you have a number of people who are creating the algorithm and analyzing the data, and some of those people are going to be non-technical. It's very, very important for non-technical people to be involved in that process, and it's perfectly possible. I have been involved in that process. Once the algorithm is created and then it keeps on learning, you actually don't need to employ all of those people. So what does this mean? It means that basically you can be much more profitable. So there's a company called Ant Financial. Has anybody heard of it? You might not have done. It's absolutely massive. but not necessarily. If you say yes, I would just love to know. So Ant Financial is a Chinese fintech company. They came out of Alibaba, and they basically are an AI company, but they're essentially a bank. So they're a payments company. You can use Ant Financial to have a bank account and to pay for things. Essentially, it's a financial services company, and it's aimed at consumers. And if literally just look at its cost structure, it serves more than 10 times as many customers as, and I know this is JP Morgan, but less than 1/10 the number of employees. So can you imagine competing with that company if you're a traditional bank? If you're a traditional bank and these guys come into your neighborhood, you are completely and utterly screwed. So, because honestly, how can you compete with that? And more, this is where the world is going. And I think when you're looking kind of where the world is going to be when we're coming out of this crisis, the business model that is going to be the most resilient is the business model that has AI and that cyclical product development at its core, not the one that just hires lots and lots of people to sit in an office together and do stuff. That's just that's not going to be as resilient. So the majority of your cost when you're looking at these kinds of business models that have the AI factory and that cyclical production process at their core is your cost majority is people. So unlike that car manufacturer that we talked about before, where it's hugely expensive to run all of that, this is not a steel mill. The majority of your cost is going to be on people. This is also going to be the case with Apple and with Peloton, even though they make actual things. So it's human talent that creates all of these algorithms and that creates designs. But also another good thing for non-technical people who are interested in tech is that the salaries are pretty good. So if the tech sector is booming, this is where you can actually go and make money. And I think this is why I really want people to leave this webinar with a feeling of positivity, that if you're listening to the news, like the way I generally now listen to the business news is I try to listen to kind of some news about tech companies as well as all the other stuff, because if you only focus on retail or restaurants or the holiday industry, you'll just be totally depressed and just think we're all going to die of starvation. But then then Amazon's results come out and you kind of think, oh, okay, so somebody's got some money. If companies have money, that means that they're going to be hiring, that means that they're going to be acquiring, that means that they're going to be funding something. And as I'm hoping to show you in this, is that there is lots and lots and lots of opportunity in technology for people who are really not very technical at all, but you just need to understand how to find it. And my aim is not to tell you, go and do this, and this is where you're going to get your dream job or found your dream company. That's not my aim. My aim is to teach you the basics of how tech companies operate, so then you can use that knowledge to either transform your career or start something. So the majority of the cost is going to be the people rather than the infrastructure, rather than stuff. And as we remembered, data storage is really super important, because if you think about Netflix, or you think about Facebook, they're holding a lot of content. They have to hold a lot of content, and that basically costs money. So when you're thinking about your business model, you need to think about that cyclical thing. You need to think, so just cyclical thing, I'm just going to show you. So yeah, so you need to think about this production process. That's step one. Then you need to think about the AI factory. That's step two. Then I would think about business models. How can you bring money in? And what do you have to spend on in order to make that money? Obviously, marketing is a cost, but that's not a tech cost. I haven't put it in there. Do we have any questions, any thoughts so far? We are going to be wrapping up relatively soon, so start typing your questions. if you have them. So what do all of those companies have in common? So let's have a look. So we've got, what do all of these business models have in common, rather? So we've got advertising, freemium, subscription, SaaS, sharing economy, e-commerce, data storage, hardware plus software. Does anybody? Data, yes. Theo, you're on fire today. Loving it. Thank you. Any more for any more? Otherwise I'm gonna tell you myself. Anybody want to add to Theo? Oh, Theo's just going to be our reigning king. Okay, cool. I'll put you out of your misery. So, yeah, AI and data collection. We've got the cyclical production process. Cyclical production process is, you know, when you hear about learning algorithms, if you hear that term, it's basically what I'm talking about, the cyclical production process. So it's always learning. It's not a you release something and then it's perfect. It's not a I work with McKinsey on it for 6 months and then I just put the strategy report to one side and never do anything about it. No, it's I release something, I learn, and then I release again, over and over again. And all of those companies have massive, massive scale. But what's super important is for non-technical people to understand that the only way any of those business models work, the only way any of those businesses can work at all is when you have the technical professionals working in harmony with non-technical professionals. And in different companies and in different models, you will have different needs for non-technical talent. So in Peloton, you're going to have all sorts of fitness trainers. In Netflix, you're going to have all sorts of people who understand how to make great movies. In Facebook, you're going to need people who understand advertising. And Amazon, you're going to have people who need to understand supply chains and retail. And all of those people have to understand how to work with a data scientist. Because essentially what a data scientist is doing is they are working alongside that non-technical person to work out what data they have that's relevant and then put it into an algorithm. So basically, if you just leave tech to the techies, they literally cannot do their job without you. But what I've personally found so difficult about working with those people is that a lot of non-technical people don't necessarily get any training on how to work with developers and data scientists, because in general, there are courses about how to learn to code or how to transition your career completely to be a data scientist. Well, I never wanted to be a data scientist. I just wanted to learn how to work with them so we can create good business outcomes. So there are lots of opportunities, I think, as I've shown you. So my first advice is going to be basically get confident and in your knowledge, learn concepts rather than skills. So by concepts, I mean understand how technical products are made and understand what questions you need to answer, understand how to hire technical teams and how to work with them, and understand how they think. And a lot of that is that production philosophy. The best way you can understand how to do all of that is get involved in building a product. So that doesn't necessarily mean go and build your own. You know, I've done it. It's a fairly extreme way of doing it. It definitely works, but you know, if that's what you want to do it. But if all you want to do is basically just transition into tech rather than be a founder, what I would suggest is see if there are other startups, if there are startups that you know that would essentially take you as a dog's body to do some help, to like help them in some way, and just say, okay, can I sit in the product management calls, and literally just sit there and just find out what they are, like just listen to them. So I've got the Telegraph here as an example. This is an example, I'm going to give you an example of a former student of mine who made a transition from non-tech to tech within a company. And that company is the Telegraph, which is one of the biggest newspapers in the UK. So she was a travel journalist, so totally non-techie. And she is now a product manager at the Telegraph. the way that happened was that journalists at the Telegraph have their own portal where they upload stories. So, we as readers, we just see the finished product, but journalists have to essentially upload their stories and their photos onto something. And this lady kept on giving her feedback as a user to the technical team about how she was using the product and how she thought the product could be improved. Eventually, she worked with the technical team so much, they got really used to her. She understood what kinds of feedback was really helping them, and she got more and more interested in product. So when a product management job opened up there, they literally invited her to apply. And now she's a product manager. And this, I'm very proud that I think this is awesome. I think this is a great story, and she loves her job. But I think this is a really great way of showing how, if you get involved in the product, you get involved in the making of it, and you start working with a technical team, you can transition, and essentially you can end up having a career in the tech sector when that's not at all what you were starting with. So in terms of, Hamad is asking, continuous learning and improvement, would I suggest more resources? Yes, funny you should ask that. I've got a course. So literally, I've just given you a very quick overview, like we're just at about an hour. But the Business of Tech course, which delves far more into this over the course of 8 weeks, starts in 2 weeks, and that's on the 8th of June. So we are going, oh, thank you, Andrea. Run, but I'll send you the follow-up with the course details. Thank you for joining. But essentially in the course, we're going to go into, the first section is going to be on the product management and user experience, essentially on how we create a product. Then we're going to be talking about how algorithms are created and how to work out what data you need to go into the algorithm. Because while you are not going to be writing the algorithm yourself, you're going to be deciding what data to put into it. And that's basically the AI operating model that we talked about. Then we will delve into business models. So we'll talk more about how tech companies make money and how tech companies spend money. And we're going to have several examples with case studies, and we're going to go through Ant Financial in much more detail. And also for the UK people on this call, what you'll be surprised about is that Ocado actually has AI at its core. So Ocado is another one of our AI case studies, which I bet none of you expected. And then we're going to have some tips from people who've transitioned into tech from non-technical backgrounds, including the former boss of Twitter for Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So sign up. The standard price is £129 for the 8 weeks. But because you've watched the webinar, for you guys, it's £89. And I will send you a link with that special offer in your emails. Hamad is asking for the slides. The slides are not going to be available. The recording is going to be available on YouTube, but the slides are not going to be available. So if you want more of this, just sign up to the course, and then you'll get slides, you'll get interviews, you'll get pre-recorded content, you'll get articles, you get all sorts of wonderful things. And you'll get time with me where you get to ask questions.